Tell us, how was your childhood?
This is my first time doing a podcast. I come from a rather dysfunctional family that was chased out of flats for not paying rent, living in poverty. No one in my family graduated high school. So the fact that I was awarded a scholarship to go to university was really a major milestone to set the trajectory of my life. But even then, I didn't realize how poor I was. These two roommates, at that moment, that was the first time I was judged for the economic situation I was in.
And how was it when you know that you are being judged?
It was painful because we were equals. I mean, we were three men living in one dormitory, going to three different paths of education. We slept in the same room. We ate at the same cafeterias. We went to the same university. So I'm living a life I don't deserve because the odds were stacked against me to leave the circle of poverty that's existed in my family for generations. You have to say out loud what you want. Too many times we internalize our desires. And it's my belief, as human beings, we're afraid of saying it out loud because now we're accountable for it.
Greg, 92 is when you joined Sennheiser, and today we are in the year 2023, over 3 decades.
I said that out loud. The year was probably 94. I said I want to be president of a company.
Why?
I didn't need to go on the other side of the fence where the grass was greener because I had grass beneath my feet. I don't want recognition. I really just want to give back to people anything that can help them advance in their life. One conversation
at a time. Greg. I told you just a couple of minutes back that I'm running short of words to express that how fortunate, how blessed I feel to have you on this podcast.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for the invitation.
And as I was telling you, that very rare you come across people where a part of you tells you that how come my path has not crossed with you earlier? And now it has crossed. I feel fortunate.
As do I. When you say those words, they give goosebumps to my skin.
Thank you. Greg, it has always been an honor and a pleasure listening to your stories, where you come from, the humble background, the humble beginnings, and where you are today. You are the president with Sennheiser, one of the finest companies in the world. However, I would love to hear more about where you come from. Who are you? Who are you before being the president of Sennheiser?
Well, first, allow me just one. I mean, I'm not a title man, so I don't chase titles, but just for your listeners, if they do a Google search, yes, one of my titles had been president. My current position is executive vice president of the group Sennheiser. Who am I and where do I come from? This really is something I don't talk a lot about because it's not something people usually. I'm just a human being. I'm just a humble servant of God. That's who I am. That's who Greg Beebe is. And where do I come from? Rather dysfunctional family that was chased out of flats for not paying rent and living in poverty. That's where I come from. And it didn't change who I am and who I exist as today. Would not change anything.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I remember our last conversation where you mentioned that I don't think that I live a life which I truly deserve. And I was wondering, what does that mean when he's saying that today I'm living a life which I don't even deserve? And also you mentioned that when I asked you this question, that if there's a word or a sentence that could define you, you said it's inspiration of hope. Tell me more about that. Why do you call yourself as an inspiration of hope? And why do you think that you are living a life that you don't deserve?
Well, they're definitely related. So I'm living a life I don't deserve because the odds were stacked against me to leave the circle of poverty that's existed in my family for generations. And by the miracle of God and having the opportunity to be in the presence of good human beings, I was able to claw my way out
Mm,
unknowingly. And at the point of arrival, I recognize that it can be done. We can claw our way out of a situation, out of an environment. And I really dedicate my life now to help function as a beacon for others to see me as an inspiration of hope. I don't look for accolades. And I mentioned to you, I mean, this is my first time doing a podcast. I don't seek out the public eye. I don't want recognition. I really just want to give back to people anything that can help them advance in their life.
mm.
One conversation at a
At
time.
a time. I just love this. Last time also you used the sentence one conversation at a time to make a difference and be a beacon of hope to all the people around us. Tell us, how was your childhood? And when you said that generations saw poverty, I've heard people talking about poverty in their lifetime. When you're talking about generations of poverty, how was it to go through what you went through?
I didn't know I was as poor as I was. I mean, when you're in an environment like that, you just you don't know. And I remember the moment it became crystal clear to me.
Mm,
And the moment it became crystal clear to me is during the first month of university. And by the way, I told you the story offline that no one in my family graduated high school. So the fact that I was
mm,
awarded a scholarship to go to university was really a major milestone to set the trajectory of my life.
mm,
But even then, I didn't realize how poor I was. I realized how poor I was because during the first month, two of my roommates and I recognized that we needed a television in our dormitory. We needed some form of entertainment. And I had saved up when I was, working, cutting lawns for a small 13-inch CRT television. And it was a
mm,
television, right? It was colored. And I said, well, I have a television, but I don't have a car. So if you can drive me to my apartment, I'm glad to pick it up. And as we were driving there, and it was a pretty rough neighborhood, but again, I didn't know because
mm,
that's who I was. The two gentlemen who came from really high levels of affluency said, wow, I knew you were poor, but I didn't realize you're dirt poor. And I was embarrassed. That's when
mm.
I realized how poor I was, when the words dirt poor were said to me by these two roommates that at that moment in time judged me. I believe that was the first time I was judged
Mm.
for the economic situation I was in.
And how was it to operate
Oh,
from that space when
it
you
was
know that you are being judged?
it was painful
Mm,
because we were equals. I mean, we were three men living in one dormitory, going to three different paths of education. We slept in the same room. We ate at the same cafeterias. We went to the same university. It didn't feel correct that they could judge. I mean, they judged me, and I try to make it a practice to not judge others. And it
mm,
felt particularly painful when I was judged, and I didn't like it. And I remember it giving me really an awareness to follow the scripture where it says, "Thou shalt not throw a stone." I don't want to throw stones upon others because I felt the pain, and I didn't want
mm.
to cause that pain to others. So I didn't like it, but I didn't hold on to it. I didn't hold a grudge,
Yeah,
but it gave me perspective.
yeah, yeah. No, Greg, help me understand where you are today. If you look back in the initial 15, 20 years of your life, Can you share an episode from your life today at where you wonder that coming from that space to where you are is nothing less than a miracle?
I don't know if I would call it a miracle per se. I call it luck. I call it hope.
Blessing, hope.
Absolutely blessing. I remember not finding religion until I was 17, 18 years old. So I didn't even know what hope was. And when I learned what hope was, I found myself becoming quite involved in prayer. And again, as I didn't realize how dirt poor I was because I lived in that environment, I didn't really feel that I wasn't living. I felt I existed. But when I went to my first job in high school and I had the chance to see people wearing ties in real life,
Hmm,
and I got to go to university and I got to see fancy cars in real life, and I got to hear stories of where people lived and all these exotic holidays they go on, I did begin to realize that this other world existed. So I wouldn't really say it was a miracle. It was more an awakening on my side. I was
hmm.
awakened that there is something more,
There's
something
another
different.
world altogether.
Yeah, but mind you, I didn't have anything against my existence. I still, to this day, I still have friends that I grew up with and playing in the streets with, and we talk occasionally, and I
Hmm,
wouldn't change it for the world. But it was through those awakenings that I had the chance to witness that something else existed,
hmm,
and I was curious. I was curious if I would be able to be more than a visitor there. Because when I was in the university, I was a
hmm,
visitor. I was a visitor in this private university that there's no way my parents could have afforded if it weren't for the scholarship. I
hmm.
was visiting that world, and I was really curious to see, can I exist in that world outside of the privilege of that 4 years?
A couple of times you've used the word God, a couple of times you've used the word blessing. What was your version of God and blessing then? And how has it shifted all these years?
As I mentioned, I didn't discover God until I was 17 or 18
Hmm,
in university.
hmm,
Prior to that, it wasn't part of my environment. It wasn't
hmm,
part of my surrounding. I mean, of course, there were churches, and of course, some of my friends, parents would go to church, but I didn't know anything. Sometimes, if you're surfing through the channels on Sunday, you could see a televised church service, but I was completely oblivious to religion in any form. I wasn't even aware that there were more than one religion. I was just so uneducated
hmm,
as it came to life. But again, as I mentioned, God and the miracle of being in the presence of really amazing human beings helped me in this journey. And one of those human beings helped introduce me to God. And it was, we talked earlier about how our paths crossed, and we're
hmm.
fortunate because this only happens a handful of times. What are the chances that a young lady who you're interested in her hometown church, which is an hour away from the university, head priest is the priest at your university? The chances of that are minimal. So all the stars aligned. It was my destiny to be part of that at that moment in time. And so that's where I discovered religion. And what it began to mean to me is it became a part of my life. It became obvious to me that there were non-negotiables. Even to this day,
Mm,
I pray before I take off on every flight, to this day, and I fly all the time. Even if
mm,
there's 2 legs, I'm praying. It's just, it's what I do. Faith, family, and friends. I mean, that's a tenet to my life, that it's just who I am. And
mm,
frankly, I live in a house, with 3 other ladies, my wife and 2 daughters, and my wife is Buddhist. And so I got the chance to go to a Jewish university to learn another religion. I got to marry a Buddhist, so now I can go to temple and to church, and we can bring our daughters up in a world where we simply introduce them to a greater good,
Mm.
and then it is their choice as human
Yeah.
beings to pick
Yeah.
their path. And
Yeah.
that's what role has played in my life.
Yeah. Since you are talking about your daughters and how it's your role to help them find a path, during one of our conversations, you mentioned that for the longest period of time, you were directionless. You did not have any hope. You did not have a role model. You did not have somebody that you can look up to. At that point in time, Greg, how did you find a path for yourself? Because very often I come across people who are saying that, you know what, Gaurav, I don't have a path. And I'm talking about direction.
I'm going to answer the question, but I'm going to come from the backside as you just mentioned it. It's one of the most common things I say to people who are asking me to help mentor them.
Mm,
I ask them, what do you want?
mm,
Because so many people will say, I would like to grow. Okay, but what does it mean? What is your desire? You need to be more concrete. And for me, my path became clear when I was in high school and I was given the opportunity to leave school without getting in trouble to go work and earn money. I needed money,
mm,
and I was able to see people, and I mentioned to you, wearing ties for the first time in real life. And I
mm,
remember my boss, Paul, and his boss, John, and I had the pleasure of working there at an insurance company in
mm,
the audio for visual department for 2 years, and they would invest time in me. And I was nothing. I was a student from one of the poorest schools in the city, and they gave me time. And that's
mm,
the thing that we all have a limit to. We all have limited time. They both gave me their time. They both invested in me. When I was leaving high school and going off to that university, John, who was a director, gave me a tie and a tie clip that I have to this day. And remember, by that point, I didn't even know how I didn't have a tie, let alone how to tie a tie or the purpose of a tie clip.
yeah. You know, I remember last time also you mentioned something very similar, where you mentioned that it's important to treat humans with kindness, regardless of everything.
Yes.
Where did you pick up this? Why it's important to be kind?
I believe I picked it up in Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts, I believe, is an international organization.
Despite the difficult childhood that you went through, the dirt poverty that you spoke about, despite that, how did you pick up it's important to be kind to people, irrespective of, regardless of everything?
Again, I think it's Boy Scouts. In Boy Scouts, there is a slogan that says a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I still remember this. And I remembered that in my life. I remembered that is what helped me get my position at Sennheiser. And I remembered how it made people feel when I paid them the respect no one else would pay. I
Mm,
did this actually during my first trip to India, and maybe it was wrong. And if it's wrong, I apologize. Please teach me. But I was going to the fitness center in the morning, and there was a man there who's helping out, and every day he would say, "Good morning, sir," to me. And the second day, I felt obligated and to actually just spend a minute with him, and I said, "Good morning, sir," to him first. And he said to me, he said, "But I'm not a sir." I said, "You're a sir to me." And he smiled. And every morning we had a different conversation with our eyes with one another.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you changed the way he used to look at himself.
Yes.
I'm just wondering and asking this question for myself. Can I change the way one looks at himself or herself? And what could be another image that I can provide to him or her that will bring a smile to their face?
I find that listening has become more of an art than it had ever been in the past.
Hmm.
And I'm sure we've all heard the proverb that we should speak less and listen more. You know, God gave us 2 ears and one mouth. We should use it in those proportions. I mean, we've all heard these proverbs, but so
Mm,
few of us really practice that. And my challenge that I share with colleagues that I'm coaching and mentoring or leading, I ask them to just observe in meetings. Just observe, and in particular, observe who is speaking less. And if and when they speak, the power of their words compared to those who need to actually be vocal the majority of the time, who
yeah,
have something to say about everything, who have an
yeah,
opinion on most topics. And again, I'm not judging. I'm just saying it's the style difference.
yeah,
If
yeah,
we really practice listening,
yeah. Just wondering, Greg, in your experience, you have led teams and you are known to build high performing teams. What do you think? Where do these people come from when they are very vocal? They have a need to have an opinion for everything and anything going on in a meeting. What do you think? Where does that come from?
I have two thoughts, and it depends on the situation. Thought one is it comes from passion. When people are passionate about something, they tend to be rather vocal. And so when you can harness these are my words, I don't know if it's true always, but when you can harness the passion, it can be quite positive.
Mm,
And then you could be speaking, quite eloquently, and you could be speaking for hours at a time. But when you cannot harness, it
mm,
becomes emotional. And when it becomes emotional, then there may be moments that you would ultimately regret.
mm,
Things that you may wish you can go back in a time machine and undo. Maybe generalize or be less factual. And so I think that the key to listening is also speaking outside of that meeting with that individual who may have been emotionally directed, and talk with them
mm,
afterward.
mm.
And I do it all the time. I say, hey, I can really understand that this is important to you, but was that
Mm.
really the best environment to involve everyone else?
Wow.
And I really just did this week. As a matter of fact, the week that just passed, I spoke with a colleague and said, yeah, I think that you may actually be off base here because you're speaking from emotion.
Yeah. What a beautiful perspective to look at. So this one sentence, when you mentioned that, they might be coming from a space of passion. It's just that when the passion is not harnessed, it can become emotional, and that could be damaging. What a shift in my perspective, because when I said that, I think I could pick up in my question itself that was a loaded question. Where is it coming from?
Yes.
And that had a judgment in that. Where is the need that they're coming from? So the need of being vocal and the need of being visible, and the way you responded shifted my perspective. So thank you.
You're welcome. And it goes back to something also we discussed just a moment ago. How and what can we do to help others change their perspective of themselves?
Mm,
And it all starts by listening.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We slow down, breathe, find our way. We all have our secrets, our tools. I mean, I count to 10 after the period
Mm,
to make certain that I don't hijack that last nuance of that statement.
mm, mm,
Count to
mm,
10,
mm. Yeah.
pause, and then respond.
Thank you. Count from 1 to 10, take a pause, reflect, and then respond. Greg, if I understand, Sennheiser was your first job. Is my understanding right?
Well, it's my first real job, yes.
Mm,
So I did. I've been working since I was 13.
yeah,
And then when I was in university, I had to work three positions to
yeah.
actually afford to live. And then I received my first job After I graduated in May. Yeah, I graduated in May,
May
and I
of
started May of 92,
92.
and I started at Sennheiser in August 92. So
Hmm.
that meant that from May to August, I actually did work another job
Hmm.
while I was interviewing at Sennheiser. I didn't know who Sennheiser was. I just knew it was near the beach. I was single, and I thought, hey, what a way to meet partners than be at the beach. But I needed a job, so I did take the first position that was available in May through August, and I spent every single lunch hour
Hmm.
eating my lunch in the pew of a church, praying for a different position because I didn't like the role I was in. I
Hmm.
didn't like the boss I had. I didn't like the environment I was in. It was the most toxic situation I've ever experienced until now. And it was, again, it was for a purpose that I witnessed that from May to August because I
Hmm.
knew I didn't want anything to do with that, nor did I want to be in
Hmm.
a situation where that would be created on my watch.
Yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. My first role was with one of the banks in India, and I had a very similar boss, and he used to treat me as if I'm a piece of vegetable,
Yeah.
right? And if you ask me those 7 months, ah, it brings shivers to me today as well. And Greg, before we double click on how did Sennheiser happen to you, let me take a pause and ask you another question. If you could recall a moment in your life before the age of 22 that brings tears of sadness or tears of joy, any one of the episodes that you may want to share that you're comfortable sharing.
Before I was 22, knowing what I know now, the moment that I was most proud of
Mm,
almost escaped me. And that was I ultimately received my position at Sennheiser
mm,
against another candidate because I was an Eagle Scout. And so I achieved my Eagle Scout rank right at age 18, which is the cutoff.
mm,
So if I didn't continue to pursue that, if while working in the insurance company in high school against all odds of all types of distractions that a 16, 17-year-old boy has, I don't know if I would have received that position at Sennheiser. So I remember being very proud because it was the first thing I had ever accomplished of substance.
mm,
Because by then I hadn't graduated high school yet. So it wasn't like I could say I graduated high school. I was on my way to, but that was the single greatest achievement
mm.
from a certificate perspective that made my mother happy, made her proud of me.
Yeah, yeah. Moments like this bring so much of richness to one's life, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's probably not fashionable nowadays to be part of a boy or girl scout or a youth boys girl club, but coming from a place where I had no inspiration, no
Mm,
role models, no idols, it was a comfortable place for me to begin to explore myself. And
mm,
there was a huge lesson, and I like telling this story in Boy Scouts because I actually just told this story to my management team to
mm,
help them understand why I am the way I am. And the
mm,
story was in Boy Scouts, to go from one rank to another rank, you must sit in what's called a board of review. It's all of the leaders and then the young man who is basically interviewed,
mm,
and then it's determined, is he ready to advance? And I remember not preparing. I explicitly remember this is nothing serious. I can get away with my wit and charm. This is just a formality. And I went in there, and it was the very first time that troop had ever denied a boy advancement.
mm.
And that boy was me. And I took that really to heart. And it really shaped how I prepare today. Prepare to really the highest ability that I can for any situation to make certain as best possible
Yeah.
that failure doesn't occur.
Yeah. That's how at times the so-called difficult moments of the past, they help us prepare for the fortune that we create for ourselves. And today, if I look back, all the difficult moments of my life, as I was telling you, I come from a humble background. And all those moments of my life where it appeared as if people are throwing bricks at me, those bricks I'm using to create a wall for myself. And I think that's how it happens with all of us. What we don't realize is that we are getting ready. Life is happening for us. It's not happening to us. Life is happening for us. And the moment we realize that, our perspective shifts. And every single episode of our life, every single experience of our life is contributing to help us become who we become. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And help me understand, Greg, 92 is when you joined Sennheiser, and today we are in the year 2023. Over
Yes.
3 decades.
Correct.
Why?
Why? As I mentor young people or I speak in panels, I often say, and as I said it earlier, you have to say out loud what you want. Too many times we internalize our desires. And there's a big difference between internalizing a desire and saying it out loud. And it's my belief, as human beings, we're afraid of saying it out loud because now we're accountable for it. And if we say it out loud, then we must do it.
Hmm.
So, for example, if we're going to try to lose weight, we'll say out loud, we're going to go on a diet on January 1st and we're going to do fitness.
Hmm.
And most people will do it
Hmm.
for 10 days and stop. And those who do it for 20 days, it becomes a habit and some will carry on, but a small percentage will actually keep fit and eat well and exercise.
Hmm.
But most people won't even say it out loud.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the point. If it's important to you, you have to say it out loud. And for me, I said out loud that I wanted to be the president of a company.
Did you say that out loud?
I said that out loud. The year was probably 94. Yeah.
2
3
years in
years.
the company, and you declared that one day you'll be the president of the company.
And I said, I want to be president of a company.
Of a company. I got it.
I didn't know Sennheiser well
Not
enough at that
Sennheiser.
point, but I
I'm sure otherwise the president then
said,
would have taken it otherwise.
no, actually, the person I said it out loud to was the man coming to become the successor to the president of the time. So I
Wow.
did say it ultimately to the president of the company. And
Hmm.
coincidentally, I'm going to be staying in his home next weekend. He's
You
retired.
are still in touch with them?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that
Absolutely.
episode. What happened? What was the
So he
situation?
was
Where were
coming to
you?
introduce himself to
Hmm.
everyone.
His first
And
day.
his first day, first week, he
Hmm.
came through, was just greeting everyone. And he said, hi, my name is John. And I said, hello, my name is Greg. And he's like, hey, what do you do here? And what's your dream? And I said, well, I'm currently working as an application engineer, and my dream is to have your job. Those were my words verbatim. And John chuckled a little bit.
Let me
We didn't.
settle down at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let me get warm in my chair first.
Yeah.
And John and I we connected. Like, we talked to how you and I
Hmm.
crossed paths and was meant to be. And for John, it was meant to be too, because remember that director at that insurance company, his name being John.
Yeah.
I don't know at that time, I didn't know a lot of Johns, but John to me somehow also reminding me of the scriptures in the Bible of John 3:16. And so the word John, it meant something to me. I didn't know it at that
Hmm.
time, but John just gave me a chance. He listened to me, and shortly after, we were together at a trade show, a fair in
Hmm.
Nashville, Tennessee, and I was still an engineer for the company, and he had witnessed me helping a customer coming up to our stand. And after the customer walked away, he came and he put his arm around me. And again, I came from a dysfunctional family where even hugging was very rare, so that was like already like a bit
Mm.
of, it's not something I'm super familiar with. And he said, for an engineer type, you're pretty good with customers. Why don't you
Wow.
go and get yourself an MBA on the company? And I mean, I thought I won the lottery when I received a scholarship to undergraduate school. And in here, I'm being offered the chance to go to a 5-year Master's of Business Administration
Mm.
program
Sponsored by the company.
sponsored by the company. And I thought, lightning does strike twice. And so that also changed the trajectory of my career,
Your
because
life. Yeah.
during that time, I also was one of, I can't remember if it was 12 or 21. I know it had a number 1 and 2 in it. Colleagues from around the world who were part of a management training program in Germany. And this
Mm.
management training program in Germany was all Europeans except one. It was me. So I went to Germany, and my wife, my very, very pregnant wife, we moved there January, and our second daughter was born in February. So very pregnant. And living there for that year, and having the opportunities to expand my network inside the company, it also showed various people inside the company what I was capable of.
Yeah.
And it was really during that time, it also defined for me what really interests me, what I like to sink my teeth into. So it
Mm.
was it was during that time that I recognized that I thoroughly enjoyed internationalism, because
Mm.
mind you, by that point in time, I had the occasional trip to Germany here or there, but that was
Yeah.
that was the extent of my international travel. But at the time I was living in Germany, I was managing our business in Southwestern Europe. So
Mm.
Greece, Turkey, Spain, Portugal. And I really, really appreciated that internationalism. And I also recognized during that moment that I enjoyed building teams. It was
Building
just
teams. Yeah.
something that I didn't know how I could do it, but it happened. And I
Yeah.
think partly, the listening empathetically, and being able to help people see their paths
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
listening and giving some advice. And also really the challenge. That was the third thing. I really liked challenge. I didn't like doing things that had been done before. I like
Mm.
doing things that were new. And so, yes, I've been at Sennheiser for 31 years, but I lost count. Where I believe I'm on my 13th position, 14th position, and
Mm.
I've managed our business in Latin America for 3 years. I managed a global business unit for 7 years. I managed our business in the Americas, and I did loads of things, and I didn't need to go on the other side of the fence where the grass was greener, because I had grass beneath my feet. I just needed to
Mm.
wiggle my toes and realize I still have some growing to do here myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Very rare I come across people who tell me that I realize that how building a team is my thing.
Yes.
Because generally I come across people who will say, you know what, building a team is the toughest of all. And here is someone who says that I love building teams.
Right.
One, what does a team mean to you? The second question is, in your experience of having built several teams globally, and that to high performing teams, today, if you were to talk about how to build high performing teams, where would you begin? What all would you include?
Certainly. So answering the first one, what is a team? A team for me is where the sum of the parts are
Mm.
greater than the individuals.
Mm.
So I say it all the time that we are stronger as a unit than a group of individuals. It's really true, because if we really just think about any sport, I mean,
Mm.
sports is always a great analogy for teams. There is no sport, and I'm not a sports person, so I could be wrong here, but
Yeah.
I'm unaware of any sport that exists that is
Mm.
done solely by an individual.
Mm.
There's always a trainer, a coach,
Yeah.
someone handling the travel, or the
Absolutely.
PR. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing that can be done to the extent of high performance
Yeah.
by an individual.
With you on that.
So that to me is a team. A team is a recognized group of individuals that realize that together their output is greater than their individual contribution. And the secret, if you want to call it that, the secret here is quite the unusual tactic. The secret, for me at least, is transparency and openness. Transparency and openness to the extent that we just need to be honest with one another. If, as I mentioned earlier, I was in a meeting this week and someone was emotionally hijacked, I believe in not punishing in public. So I separately went to the individual privately and said, hey, I think you got emotionally hijacked there. Let's maybe try to work together to find a way to get your point across in a different method next time.
So would you convey this to that person that you're emotionally hijacked?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I did.
And what has been your experience? How do people respond to this? Because they're emotionally hijacked, and any feedback that you provide to them, they would have a reaction for that.
I find you have to give space. I mean, we all learn at different rates. So sometimes when I say things, people might get it then and there and say, oh, you're right. Maybe I should have ... Like again, this week, I said to somebody, hey, you asked for advice. You were given advice, but your email reply ignored the advice. And you copied the people that you asked advice of. And I called the person and I took the time. I called the person and said, hey, by the way, if you ask for advice, you should at least have the courtesy to say thank you. And I'm going to go another way. Not ask for advice, ignore it, and go another way. It's a bit about slowing down here, Gaurav. So the transparency and openness is being able to dedicate the time to unpack situations, because most of the time we just get so caught up in life that we just move forward. And I have the belief that momentum actually could happen in reverse. I mean, if it's a ball moves forward as it does move backward, and moving backward is still momentum. And sometimes if we slow down, we actually can gain insights to speed up. And we're taught in business schools to really focus on our blind spots and weaknesses. And I think that's the furthest from the truth. I think the thing we should be doing is really harnessing what we're superheroes at. And
the gifts and the talents that we have been blessed with.
Absolutely. And that's my point about the transparency, is to take the time to actually unpack situations, recognizing that some people may not get it immediately. Sometimes it takes weeks, months, years for them to come back and say, I had time to process.
What I'm listening is, Greg, that apart from the transparency and the openness that you spoke about, where you would share the things as they are, I also picked up one's ability to give feedback.
Yes.
And something which is very prominent that we have been accentuating on for on in this conversation is the importance of giving time to the other person and listening to the other person.
Yes.
What do you think? What are the possible impediments in building a high-performing teams that you have come across?
One that comes to the top of my mind immediately, because we're trained to do it, is we are trained to make statements.
Loose judgments, are you talking about?
Well, it could be a judgment or a statement. I mean, a judgment is a statement, but a statement isn't always a judgment. But if you go back and just think of a meeting you were in and you listen, observe who's speaking the most, try to put a value equation on those words. Those that speak less, put a value scale on those words. But then if we actually observe, are we making statements? I don't know if that's the best color shirt for you, Aura. That's a statement. Or, hey, I was wondering, do you have any other color shirts besides white? It's different because if you ask questions, you invite a reply. If you make a statement, you close a door. And I find that in
Yeah.
building statements are limiting progress. Back to my point of that ball and that momentum. Making a statement isn't momentum. Asking a question is momentum.
Yeah.
As long as you're willing to devote the time to listen to the answer.
Yeah. It connects me. Sometime back, I was having conversation with someone where she spoke about the importance of curiosity,
Yes.
right? Because the moment I make a statement, what I'm killing is the curiosity in that moment,
Yes.
right? Um, Greg, is it possible to share an episode or one of those examples where you were making an attempt to build a team, and yet the insecurities and the fears that the team members were operating from, they were killing the energy that you were trying to create? What
Yes.
was that instance? What were the conflicts in the team, and how did you manage to deal with those conflicts?
So I think of one immediately, and it happened last year, November. We all are busy, and everyone can say, I'm busier than the next. But
Yeah.
the truth is, when we forget why we're here and how we got here, it's very easy to fall into a trap. And we all make mistakes, and we all forget that it's lonely to be a leader. And I think
Yeah.
it's okay to talk about the fact that it's lonely to be a leader and that leaders make mistakes. So last year, November, I made a declaration of a decision. It's very unlike me. I'm normally more of a seeking for buy-in. So everyone gets a chance to understand why I'd like to go a certain way, and everyone is given time to offer their views and opinions. But last year, November, we were moving pretty quickly because my position was changing, and I had every excuse of why I was going fast, but I didn't have a good reason. I was going fast and I shouldn't have, and it caused quite an uproar. But because the team exists in an environment of mutual respect and trust, and we really promote open feedback culture, I was called out by three colleagues in that meeting for, Greg, you're wrong. And I value that. I value that feedback. And it did take me back because I wasn't behaving as they were used to. And
Your different
so,
way of being there was that.
yes, yeah, and it was, again, it's an excuse, but it was because we were moving fast. And in my mind, I said, clearly, this has struck a nerve. I can't really open the door to negotiate this because the decision is the decision. I just need to invest now more time individually with those who called me out to help them understand why I decided what I decided. But if I would have practiced what I preached, I would have in the group taken the time to slow down to explain why I was making that decision. And so it caused really unnecessary tensions that lasted for about 4 months. And that meeting is still talked to this day as a revelation for some to say, they say, this proved that Greg's a human. He also makes mistakes.
So,
And
what
it's,
helped you to get out of that? One-to-one conversations, or showing
yes,
your vulnerability and
yes,
admitting that I made a mistake, or you know, giving people more time to understand, giving myself more time to explain where I was coming from. So, what helped you?
all those things you mentioned, Aurora, I needed to invest the time one-on-one with the people to understand why. I needed to be empathetic that I have these three things that I say are my expectations. If so, anybody who knows me knows, please be on time, whether it's a meeting or a deliverable or a dinner appointment. Just please be on time. No surprises. Surprises are reserved for birthdays and holidays, and have fun. Those are the three things that I really try to instill in any of these high performing teams that I work in. And I surprised them in that meeting. So didn't practice what I preached, and I needed to basically backstroke and reassure everyone individually and then ultimately together
Mm.
that we all make mistakes, we all can feel pressure, and the one of the key benefits of being a team is to actually be able to trust others with our eyes closed.
Yeah.
Trust
Yeah.
others with our eyes closed basically is the symbolism, but we all seen these trust falls, but it's like there's no ulterior motives. I mean, there's a current policy that we have in place. One of our colleagues mentioned to me just a few weeks ago, "Hey, Greg, if an employee violates that policy, are we going to terminate them?"
Mm.
I'm like, "No, we're not going to terminate them. But what do you think we should do if they violate it?" And I asked their opinion because then that's what they know me as. They don't know me as the fist pounding table guy. Hey, this is a declaration, just do it. And
Yeah.
that's what I did last year, November. And
Yeah.
it really, again, I share this story, Laura, because I think it's really important that it takes a lot of time to build trust, and trust is the foundational element for a high performing team.
Yeah.
And it takes a single episode to
To break
question
that.
trust. I
Absolutely.
want to say break it, but to question it. Can
Yeah.
I trust this man who's behaved that way ever since I known him? And then all this comes. Whoa, I'm not really sure what's going on. And it's the stability, it causes weakness at the knees. And
Yeah.
it takes time to recover from that.
Yeah. So, Greg, what I'm listening, of course, I'm listening to the story that you're sharing, but I'm also listening is that how it's so important for a leader to come from a space of, I don't know, I might not have all the answers. Can we come together and explore it together?
Yes.
I might not be the best person to handle this situation. Can we all come together, contribute, put everything in the melting pot and see what emerges from there?
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, how have you been able to operate from this space despite the ranks, despite the positions? What has been your driver? What has been your anchor? What has been your source of groundingness?
I'm repeating myself, but using a different word. It's the honesty, it's the openness, it's the transparency. I say, I don't have the answer. I really don't know exactly what I'm talking about here, but my instinct causes me to ask this question.
Mm.
And I just said it last week. I mean, I was asked by a direct report, we're about to do this structural change. Greg, I know you're prepared. Back to my Boy Scout story. I'm always prepared now. I know you're prepared. You've got the answer. What's the answer? His words were, tell me what to do, boss, and I'll do it. And my response was, I don't have the answer. We
Mm.
have to figure it out together.
And it's
And
okay.
it is okay.
Mm.
It is absolutely okay. And because it's also okay to ask for help. I, in between meetings, I could choose to get caught up on my
Mm.
email or to call colleagues. And I don't play hierarchy at all. In fact, I call people, I don't even know where they fit in the organization sometimes. I call people because people are human beings and I care about human beings. And I called a human
Mm.
being this week and I said, I thought about you because I was reading some market studies and I remember we had a mentor mentee relationship last year and you were interested in something. And I saw something in this report that made me think of you, and look what I found. And we had an incredible conversation on this. And if I really think about it right now, that person is 4 hierarchy levels below me, and
Mm.
I didn't care. He didn't care.
I think that's what leadership is all about. Holding the space for others where people focus on not on the hierarchies, people don't focus on the titles and the positions, but focus on the task in hand. And they genuinely care for what they care for, what the organization care for, rather than getting stuck with the hierarchies and the positions and the titles.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I know hierarchy must exist. And I know
Mm.
people say to me all the time, Greg, you could say hierarchy doesn't matter because you're the boss. And I hate admitting it because it is true that hierarchy does exist. But I still believe hierarchy is a belief we could choose to accept or ignore.
Yeah.
So I don't speak any differently to that gentleman about that market data that I saw in the report that I
Mm,
do to Daniel Sennheiser, who's my boss. I mean, I speak to
yeah.
him as a human being, and that's ultimately what we all want. We all want to be treated as human beings. And to me, this is the greatest gift I could offer anyone is the gift of knowledge that if everyone wants to be appreciated for being a human being, then please accept that there's a difference between hearing and listening. If you listen to someone, you can process what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Then
You
you
know,
can actually have a conversation.
yeah. Yeah. I'm just wondering, Greg, do you have a practice that you do on day-to-day basis where you continue to remind yourself that I'm a human being and I need to treat others like human being, irrespective of whether I'm talking to Mr. Sennheiser or am I talking to an executive with 1 year of experience in the organization?
I don't have a practice per se
Mm,
that I do every day, but I do have regular reminders
mm,
during the course of days, weeks, months, quarters, years, in interactions with people, like that dinner I had on Friday night with a man that I only had a coffee with prior. I just listened to another human being, asked questions, offered perspective, and his comments were comments of appreciation.
yeah. Yeah.
And you can have that exchange of appreciation with the gentleman who is overseeing the fitness center at the hotel, someone packing your groceries, the banker, an executive, or the Uber driver. We're
Mm,
all human beings. And the moment that we take that for granted and believe that there is a difference, I believe that is the moment in time where we risk forgetting who we are.
yeah. 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 I love it when you said that it's not about practices, that it's about reminders.
Yeah.
And the moment we forget, we lose ourselves. Greg, where are you heading in your life now? What are you curious about at this phase of your life?
You're giving me goosebumps on this question. Where am I curious? I'm curious about preparing our company for the next generation. I'm
Mm,
curious about learning all there is about retirement someday. I'm curious about helping others in a retirement setting. I'm curious about how to continue serving, whether we talk about my daughters,
mhm,
community, friends, religion. Those are things I'm curious about
mm.
extensively.
Thank you so much, Greg. An absolute honor. And as I mentioned at the start of this conversation, I'm still running out of words. I know it's more than an honor for me. It's more than a pleasure. It's more than a delight for me to interact with you. And I so wish our paths continue to cross as I evolve as to become a better human being, and so that I can learn from you and become a human being, just 1% of the human being that you are, Greg. And I'm sure it will be absolute worthy a ride that I'll be on to. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. The pleasure's mine, and I wish you continued success on your journey. Bye for now.